Hello everyone, and welcome back to our discussion of Julius Caesar, Act 2, Scene 1. So we're still in the same setting in this scene. So it's the dawn on March 15th, so the sun is rising on the Ides of March. And we left off with Brutus in this emotional conflict when all of a sudden he hears a knock at his gate. Come to find out that this knock comes from Cassius and the rest of the conspirators. So with that being said, our list of characters is going to be much longer today. So in addition to Cassius and Brutus, we're also going to get the rest of the conspirators together. So Casca and Cinna, who we've already met, but three others, Decius, Metellus, and Trebonius. And a fair warning, this portion of the scene is a bit long, but I wanted to tackle it in this length so that we get a clear and concise picture of the workings and interactions of the conspirators together. So if you prefer just to skip on over to after the dramatic reading and straight to the analysis, I've given you the timestamp here below, so feel free to do that if you want to read on your own and then listen to the analysis. Enter the conspirators, Cassius, Casca, Decius, Cinna, Metellus, Cimber, and Trebonius. I think we are too bold upon your rest. Good morrow, Brutus. Do we trouble you? I have been up this hour, awake all night. Know I these men that come along with you? Yes, every man of them, and no man here but honours you, and every one doth wish you had but that opinion of yourself which every noble Roman bears of you. This is Trebonius. He is welcome hither. This, Decius Brutus. He is welcome too. This, Casca. This, Cinna. And this, Metellus Cimber. They are all welcome. What watchful cares do interpose themselves betwixt your eyes and night? Shall I entreat a word? They whisper. Here lies the east. Doth not the day break here? No. Oh, pardon, sir, it doth. And yon grey lines that fret the clouds are messengers of day. You shall confess that you are both deceived. Here, as I point my sword, the sun arises, which is a great way growing on the south, weighing the youthful season of the year. Some 2 months hence, up higher toward the north, he presents his fire, and the high east stands as the capital, directly here. Brutus and Cassius rejoin the others. Give me your hands all over, one by one, and let us swear our resolution. No, not on oath. If not the face of men, the sufferings of our souls, the time's abuse, if these be motives weak, break off betimes, and every man hence to his idle bed. So let high-sided tyranny range on, till every man drop by lottery. But if these, as I am sure they do, bear fire enough to kindle cowards, and to steal with valor the melting spirits of women, then, countrymen, what need we any spur but our own cause to prick us to redress? What other bond than secret Romans that have spoke the word and will not palter? And what other oath than honesty to honesty entangled that this shall be, or we will fall for it? Swear priests and cowards, and men cautelous, old feeble carrions, and such suffering souls that welcome wrongs, unto bad causes swear. Such creatures as men doubt, but do not stain the even virtue of our enterprise, nor the insuppressive metal of our spirits, to think that of our cause or our performance did need an oath when every drop of blood that every Roman bears, and nobly bears, is guilty of his several bastardy, if he do break the smallest particle of any promise that hath passed from him. But what of Cicero? Shall we sound him? I think he will stand very strong with us. Let us not leave him out. No, by no means. Oh, let us have him, for his silver hairs will purchase us a good opinion, and by men's voices to commend our deeds. It shall be said, his judgment ruled our hands. Our youths and wildness shall no whit appear, but all be buried in his gravity. Oh, name him not. Let us not break with him, for he will never follow anything that other men begin. Then leave him out. Indeed, he is not fit. Shall no man else be touched, but only Caesar? Decius, well urged. I think it is not meet Mark Antony, so well beloved of Caesar, should outlive Caesar. We shall find of him a shrewd contriver, and you know, his means, if he improve them, may well stretch so far as to annoy us all, which to prevent, let Antony and Caesar fall together. Our course will seem too bloody, Caius Cassius, to cut the head off and then hack the limbs, like wrath and death and envy afterwards. For Antony is but a limb of Caesar. Let us be sacrificers, but not butchers, Caius. We all stand up against the spirit of Caesar, and in the spirit of men there is no blood. Oh, that we, then, could come by Caesar's spirit, and not dismember Caesar. But, alas, Caesar must bleed for it, and, gentle friends, let's kill him boldly, but not wrathfully. Let's carve him as a dish fit for the gods, not hew him as a carcass fit for hounds. And let our hearts, as subtle masters do, stir up their servants to an act of rage, and after seem to chide him. This shall make our purpose necessary, and not envious, which so appearing to the common eyes, we shall be called purgers, not murderers. And for Mark Antony, think not of him, for he can do no more than Caesar's arm when Caesar's head is off. Yet I fear him, for in the engrafted love he bears to Caesar, alas, good Cassius, do not think of him. If he loved Caesar, all that he can do is to himself. Take thought, and die for Caesar. And that were much he should, for he is given to sports, to wildness, and much company. There is no fear in him. Let him not die, for he will live and laugh at this hereafter. Clock strikes. Peace. Count the clock. The clock hath stricken 3. 'Tis time to part. But it is doubtful yet whether Caesar will come forth today or no, for he is superstitious grown of late, quite from the main opinion he held once of fantasy, of dreams, and ceremonies. It may be these apparent prodigies, the unaccustomed terror of this night, and the persuasion of his augurers may hold him from the capital today. Never fear that. If he be so resolved, I can o'ersway him, for he loves to hear that unicorns may be betrayed with trees, and bears with glasses, elephants with holes, lions with toils, and men with flatterers. But when I tell him he hates flatterers, he says he does, being then most flattered. Let me work, for I can give his humor the true bet, and I will bring him to the capital. Nay, we will all of us be there to fetch him. By the 8th hour, is that the uttermost? Be that the uttermost, and fail not then. Caius Ligarius doth bear Caesar hard, who rated him for speaking well of Pompey. I wonder none of you have thought of him. Now, good Metellus, go along by him. He loves me well, and I have given him reasons. Send him but hither, and I'll fashion him. The morning comes upon us. We'll leave you, Brutus. And friends, disperse yourselves, but all remember what you have said, and show yourselves true Romans. Good gentlemen, look fresh and merrily. Let not our looks put on our purposes, but bear it as our Roman actors do, with untired spirits and formal constancy. And so, good morrow to you, everyone. Let's begin then by taking a look at how we can unpack this meeting of the conspirators. So in this beginning section, we continue to see more hints that Cassius is the true author of these letters. But also, we see that all the conspirators are finally in one place, this moment in the play that we all have been waiting for. And speaking of sort of Cassius betraying his identity as the author of these letters, these are the verses in particular that show this, right? Because remember, part of the discussion that Cassius has initially with Brutus is that Brutus is unable to see himself, to see that the people of Rome desire him to be in power. And this is something that is hinted at in the letters as well. So another sign that should wake Brutus up to the fact that he has been duped by Cassius, but Brutus is going to remain blind to it in large part because he's already made up his mind to join the conspiracy. Speaking of our conspiracy, we also are introduced to the rest of the conspirators, and we see that Brutus happily welcomes them into his home, meaning that we finally see another step forward in terms of Brutus coming to terms with joining the conspiracy. And Brutus now is going to begin the conversation that they have for the remainder of this video, in which he is asking Cassius what troubles him that brings him to Brutus's home in the middle of the night. And we also are going to be speculating why Cassius has come. But we don't get the firm answer that we want, because initially we see that Brutus and Cassius speak in private, so everything that happens between them happens off the stage. And this leaves not just you and I guessing, but also the rest of the conspirators. And what they do instead, right, instead of trying to figure out what Brutus and Cassius are saying, right, because they cannot eavesdrop, they clearly went off to be alone, they begin to argue about petty things, things that don't matter. And in prime example, right, arguing about which side the sun will rise from. And this takes up a majority, right, of their conversation while Brutus and Cassius are off doing their own thing. And one thing just I want to point out here in terms of literary devices is that we see Casca make use of that higher knowledge that he has, although he tends to fall back into this character who readily is full of jokes and good humor. He's also an intelligent character, and we see this here in his use of personification in the sun, right? He first presents as fire, meaning that he argues that the sun, although it appears on this portion of the horizon now, in a few months, right, later on as it gets into spring and summer, that it's going to shift. And so we see Brutus and Cassius come back, and much like the rest of the conspirators probably have surmised for themselves, in the fact that Brutus and Cassius come back and wanting to join hands with the rest of the conspirators, we can safely hypothesize that the private conversation that's been happening has revealed that indeed Brutus is finally in on the conspiracy, and he has reached this point where there's no turning back, and he's going to agree to join them in killing Caesar. But here we also begin to see something interesting, and that is the beginning of a conflict that will exist in a good portion of this scene between Brutus and Cassius, and almost like this power play between them, and one where Cassius is driven by his distrust of others, whereas Brutus is driven by his honor. And so, driven by his distrust of others, Cassius suggests or recommends that they all take an oath, that they are going to go through with this conspiracy, that they're all in it together, and if one of them rats the others out, they're all going down. So kind of this way to ensure that no one backs out at this late stage. But Brutus, on the other hand, is going to think that's a bad idea. And he thinks it's a bad idea because of the honor that he has. Remember, he makes up his mind to kill Caesar because he believes it's the best thing for Rome. So he begins to say, really, if our motives are so weak, meaning the reason why we're killing Caesar is something that can be shaken, we should just end this now, right? Because he looks at an oath as sort of this already showing an inkling of your desire to back out, when he doesn't want to back out. And he urges them, right, that there is a lot riding on this. And his prime example here, right, is that if we don't do anything, right, if we let this tyranny of Caesar go on, each one of us are going to drop, right? We can take it meaning that they're going to drop from power, or they're going to drop literally in terms of death by lottery, meaning by chance. So he says either we do something now, or we sit idly and wait for our deaths. And he continues to go into this persuasive mode of trying to encourage the rest of the conspirators to disavow this need for an oath. And he begins by using rhetorical questions here. And he uses these to reveal why no oath is needed. He says, what need we any spur but our own cause to prick us to redress? Meaning, what other motivation do we need than the fact that Caesar is a tyrant? What other bond than secret Romans that have spoke the word and will not palter? Meaning that you and I, being Romans, having given our word to one another, that means something. We don't need an oath, right? Our own identity, our nationality ties us to one another, right? And what other oath than honesty to honesty entangled, that this shall be, or we will fall for it. So here he gives perhaps his greatest argument, right? We all know that each other is in on it. So if we rat one another out, right, we take everyone down. Or if we fall, right, if we fail to kill Caesar, then Caesar is going to come after us. So a big reason why there's no need for an oath. It's literally life or death for them. And additionally here, we're going to see Shakespeare do something interesting in terms of syntax, that meaning the structure of our sentence. And we see it first here in this line, swear priests. And this is interesting because in the English language, we don't usually put a verb before our subject, before our noun. So when we see it used here, right, it's a way to, again, highlight and to draw our attention with this break in syntax, that this is an important part of Brutus's lengthy speech, right? So first he identifies the fact that priests are the ones who swear. Priests not in our modern understanding of the word, but in ancient times, right? And he does this again when he says, not just priests and cowards need an oath, but men cautelous, right? Cautelous here being an adjective. So normally in English, in our syntax or structure, this adjective needs to come before the noun that it's describing, being men. But here again, Caesar's doing this to draw our attention, or Shakespeare rather, is doing this to draw our attention to the type of men who need an oath. Men who are wicked, who are unscrupulous, meaning they are lacking in morals and ethics. And as if this isn't enough, we also see that Brutus is given a metaphor to drive this point home, that old feeble carrions and suffering souls are the ones who need to make an oath. And carrion literally meaning something with flesh that's rotting, that's dead. So he says, these are the type of people, not you and I, who need an oath. And so here we see Brutus, right, he is all in for the conspiracy because he believes it to be honorable. And this is why he fights so much against that oath, because he views this oath as sort of a dishonorable thing. And one of the central things that we see about Brutus is he believes to his core that their enterprise, meaning their conspiracy, is one that's virtuous because they're doing it for the people of Rome. Right? And because of that, right, he believes that they will not fail in their courage to follow through with it. Again, another reason they don't need to make an oath. But something also that Brutus reveals, and it's one of his tragic flaws, right? Remember, we're talking about also in the midst of all of our literary analysis, this tragic hero that exists in Julius Caesar. And one of the tragic flaws that we see in Brutus is the fact that he believes that everybody else around him is just as honorable as he is, right? Because they're fellow Romans, this is his logic, I can trust them just as they can trust me. And he says it in these lines, right? Let no one, right, who has sworn to follow through with this, fall back on their word. But again, Brutus here shows that he's short-sighted because he trusts and believes everyone to be honorable. But we've already seen that Cassius is not below stooping to deceit to get what he wants. So again, Brutus really cannot trust people in the way that he thinks. And we continue to see another suggestion that is brought about in terms of adding people to the conspiracy. And now they seek to add Cicero. And remember, you'll have run into Cicero before in the last scene of Act 1, where he runs into Casca in the middle of the street, and he essentially tells Casca that his way of reading the signs is simply he's looking too far into things. And so here, Cassius, Casca, Cinna, and Metellus, so everyone with the exception of Brutus and Decius, suggest that Cicero needs to be part of their conspiracy, and Cassius says the word, and everyone readily agrees. Until we see Brutus. And Brutus here steps up and says that we shouldn't involve Cicero, because I know that Cicero never does anything if it's the idea of other men. Meaning he is someone who is a leader not a follower. And in the same breath, right, Cassius, then Casca, both readily say, okay, leave him out of it. So here we see, again, this continued power struggle between Brutus and Cassius. Brutus so far emerging as the winner in terms of leading the conspiracy. And then another suggestion is brought up by Decius, and he is showing his true colors, and essentially the true colors of the conspiracy itself, when he says, "Shall no man else be touched, but only Caesar?" And so here he's asking the question, should we just kill Caesar? Is that enough? Or do we need to kill other people? And now Cassius, again jumping in, showing his true colors, shows that Mark Antony, he believes, also needs to go. Because he describes Mark Antony as a shrewd contriver, meaning someone who is an excellent plotter or schemer. And he fears, rightly or wrongly, we don't know yet, that Antony is so much a friend and lover of Caesar, right, in the Platonic sense, that he will do anything to avenge Caesar, and so hence he needs to go as well. But Brutus again is going to step in with his sense of honor and say no, and he does so by likening Antony to the limbs of Caesar, right? And he's saying essentially killing Caesar or cutting off the head of the problem is enough, right? If we seek to hack off the limbs, meaning the outer sort of issues, the ones that are not central, then we're going to end up looking like butchers, not like heroes of Rome. We see Brutus continued to go into this long speech explaining why we need not get rid of Antony, right? And his primary concern is going to be one based on honor, right? So whereas we have Cassius showing his shrewdness, in this sense his cold nature, here we see Brutus working in terms of honor. So again, he wants them to be seen not as butchers, but as people who are sacrificing Caesar for the greater good. If they go hacking Caesar's friends left and right, obviously the Roman people, right, are not going to be able to stomach that. And here we also see that touch of humanity that exists still in Brutus, right? That he is reluctant to kill Caesar, right? He even wishes that there was a way to kill Caesar's spirit, meaning his drive and love for power, without having to kill him in body, right? But he is going to obviously know that is not possible and continue on with the conspiracy. But continuing on in a sense that they are still acting for the greater good, right? Using this imagery of not butchering Caesar like he is a carcass to feed to the dogs, but as a dish you're presenting to the gods, right? So this grandiose, romanticized act of sacrifice, only Caesar, unknowingly, is the one who will be making all of the sacrifice. And here, again, we continue to see Brutus's beauty in terms of his language, and imagery here that although shows sort of his honor in terms of, I'm looking at this as something I'm doing because it serves the greater good, but I hate to do it, right? This image of my heart after this deed is done by my hands will chastise it, right? Will command it to say enough is enough. But in the same turn, this also works to distance Brutus away from the act itself, right? So as if he's trying to convince himself that he really is doing this for the greater good. And also here to end this speech, this is why he says here that Mark Antony needs to remain untouched, right? Because this is an act of killing one man and one man alone, Caesar. But Cassius, never one to be easily convinced, still fears Brutus, right? And he fears him for this engrafted or deep-rooted love that Antony has for Caesar. And we need to remember that Cassius is well known throughout the play for his ability to see into the true heart of people. So if Cassius is afraid of Antony, we should be thinking that maybe he has a right to do so. But Brutus, as always, is going to jump in, right? And he essentially sort of waves his hand at the issue and says, don't worry about Antony, right? The worst thing that could happen is he's so upset because of Caesar's loss that he kills himself. But Cassius, don't worry, he's far too much of a sporty character, a wild character, someone who loves life to do this. And this convinces Trebonius and the other conspirators, we can presume, because it's not discussed again. And Cassius moves on then to another problem, right? The problem of Caesar, during this time away from the screen, that he's become very superstitious in terms of the things going on around him, and rightly he should be, right? In case of the dramatic irony going on here, we know Caesar should be suspicious. We've been urging him to be suspicious, and finally he's beginning to be. But this is a problem for the conspirators, because now they believe that perhaps this means Caesar will not come to the Senate tomorrow after all, which will be a huge problem for them. So here we see that Cassius is going to explain exactly why Caesar's become so superstitious, and their sort of plan to counteract this, to trick him into coming into the Senate on the Ides of March anyway. And he says that Caesar has been speaking to fortune tellers or augurers, and that this is in part why he's become so suspicious, right? So finally he's taking the warning of the seer in the first act of the play, and he's bewaring for himself. But Decius, right, again showing his true colors as a trickster, right, he boasts that he can get Caesar to the Senate anyway. And the main way in which he says this is comparing Caesar to a wild animal that's easily trapped and ensnared by things. And he says that he can trap and ensnare Caesar with flattery. And although this may be true, we see that Cassius suggests that they all go together anyway to plead with Caesar to come to the Senate, and they agree that on the 8th hour, meaning at 8 o'clock, they will all meet together to bring Caesar to the Senate to fulfill their assassination plot. So we see this portion of the scene is going to end with a plan to bring in one more conspirator, Caius Ligarius, and that this is seemingly a friend to Brutus, right? Someone who was a supporter of Pompey, so logically speaking, he would be against Caesar. And we see that Brutus is going to suggest that we have Metellus, right, bring Caius to Brutus, and that he'll fashion him or encourage him to join the conspiracy. We also see that Brutus begins to show an inclination, or an ability at least, to also be able to deceive, because as the conspirators go out, he urges them to sort of put on this mask. He says, be like Roman actors, so this use of a simile. Be like these actors who put on a mask, who hide their true face, right? And he urges them to do that because there is no other way, unless they hide their faces, right, their true intentions, that they'll be able to get away with this assassination plot. That's going to be it for video number 27. Thank you so much for hanging in there with me. I know it's a bit of a long one, but there really was no good way to break up this portion of the scene. In our next video, we're going to finish Act 2, Scene 1, and we're going to finally get to have a long, extensive dialogue with a woman, Portia, Brutus's wife. And we're going to see that Portia is going to seek to understand why Brutus is in so much emotional turmoil, and really begin to see the sort of downhill spiral that's going to kick off the rest of the play. So please do make sure that you're taking notes as you continue to watch, because after the video that I'll post tomorrow, I will also upload the worksheet for Act 2, Scene 1, which will be due shortly after. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.